Hello, welcome. So glad you could join us today. This is our final Miami-Dade Environmental Education webinar of this season. So we're really happy to have you joining us for this special episode of environmental sustainability in Miami on extreme heat. Very happy to co-host this event today with the FIU Office of Global Learning Initiatives, with the Department of Journalism and Media and Communications, Architecture and the Arts at Florida International University. My name is Tiffany Troxler. I'm an associate professor in the Earth and Environment Department, and also Director of Science of the Sea Level Solutions Center in the Institute of Environment. And we have some great speakers joining us today. We have Pia Palomino from the with the Family Action Network movement, who will be joining us for making some slide presentation and joining us for a panel. We have Olivia Collins with the Clio Institute, who will be talking to us today about extreme heat and climate change, and joining us for a panel discussion. And we have Myra Cruz from Catalyst Miami, who will also be joining us for a slide presentation and panel discussion. So thank you all very much. We're so happy to have you. And I will turn it over to Mari for some IT things to deal with. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's really great to see you all again connecting. So thanks for those who are rejoining us, and welcome to those who are new. Today, like Tiffany said, is our last panel. So I'm a little bittersweet today. But for those who are joining us for the first time on Facebook, so we're going to be using a Q&A feature on Zoom, and also our polls. We're going to do some polls. So for those who are watching on Facebook and would like to engage in these polls and submit questions throughout the webinar, just connect via Zoom. So here's a registration link that you're seeing on the screen, or you can use your mobile device camera, kind of scan that QR code, and it's going to take you straight to that registration page for Zoom. And then once you register, you're going to be able to log in and see all of the Q&A and the poll features. And at any time, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, again, use the QA function in the Zoom menu bar, and we'll address this during our webinar. And now that's been taken care of, let's go ahead and start our first poll. So this is a quality of life poll. Don't worry, you're not being quizzed. We just want to see what you think. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this first poll. You should be seeing on your screen 6 questions that I'm going to slowly go over, and we're going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes to answer these. So take your time. The first question you should be seeing on the screen is, I am a non-student or student. So you could just click on the right response for you. And I can see your questions coming in. Your responses coming in. So the second question you should be seeing on your screen is the type of business where I work is. Is it private sector, government, nonprofit? Are you self-employed, or are you not working? All right, and the third question you should be seeing as well is, what are the 3 most important things that determine your quality of life? So this is selected top 3. This is a multiple choice. The options are health, family and friends, happiness, freedom, learning and education, religion, being outdoors, connecting with nature, work-life balance, safety or security, or a good pay or job. All right, I'm gonna read question number 4. What are the 3 most important concerns you have about sea level rise and flooding? This is multiple choice, so select your top 3. Applying science to make good decisions to address these issues, increasing threat from storm surge, impacts to property or property value, impacts on community, friends and family, lack of awareness and no action to address it, or impacts to natural habitats and wildlife, exacerbation of social inequities, relocation, water contamination and public health impacts, or impacts to infrastructure. I can see your responses coming in, so thanks for those who are voting. And again, for those who are just joining us on Facebook Live, we are doing a quick poll. You can participate in this and submit questions to our webinar panel by registering on the Zoom link that you see on the screen right now, which is bit.ly/ENV sessions. All right, let's read over question number 5. What are the 3 most important concerns you have about other impacts of climate change? And this is a multiple choice response, so again, select your top 3. We have increase in heat and extreme heat, most intense storms, applying science to make good decisions and address these issues, impacts to property or property value, impacts on community, friends and family, impacts to natural habitats and wildlife, impacts on public health, increase in threat from storm surge, lack of awareness and no action to address it, and exacerbation of social inequities. And for our last question, we have, what do you think are the 3 highest priority initiatives or actions that can be done to reduce impacts of climate change and improve your quality of life? So again, choose your top 3. We have increase use of renewable energy, use bonds or small increase in taxes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and finance projects to reduce climate change impacts. We have increased city and community initiatives that supports household activities like composting, eating less meat, planting more trees, elevate building and other infrastructure, update codes, planning and infrastructure based on best available science, increase city or community green infrastructure initiatives like tree planting, vegetating swells, and increase restorations of coastal habitats, support low wealth communities, increase community awareness and education, move to a lower risk neighborhood where codes have been implemented based on best available science, improve stormwater and flood management, and lastly, improve water management. So I'm just going to give you 1 more minute to answer these questions. We have about 60% of you have voted, so hopefully we can get up to 75. And I know we have 54 participants at the moment, so thanks for those who continue to join us. All right,
Why don't you wait for a little bit longer, Monty? Thank you.
Let's hopefully we get higher numbers, right? 75. I see them coming in. And if you have any questions that are not necessarily for the panel, you can always use the chat feature just in case maybe you're not seeing the polls or any other questions you may have. Oh, nice. We have 83%. Can we get to a higher number? Okay, it's increasing. Great. All right, I'm going to give you guys 30 more seconds and we'll close the polls. And we'll take a look at what this group thinks. All right, can we get to a higher number? We're at 84% now. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll now. All right, let's take a look at what we have here. Let's see. Okay, we have 53% of you are not students, and we have 47% students. The type of business where most of you are not working. The second group would be government and nonprofit. What are the 3 most important things that determine your quality of life? 79% of you said health, 61% of you said family and friends, and 37% of you said happiness, and another 37% said work-life balance. What are the 3 most important concerns you have about sea level rise and flooding? 61% of you answer applying science to make good decisions to address these issues. 53% said impacts to natural habitat and wildlife. And 50% said lack of awareness and no action to address it. What are the 3 most important concerns you have about other impacts of climate change? 24% of you said increasing heat and extreme heat. 13% said exacerbation of social inequities. And then 11% said impacts to natural habitat and wildlife. So what do you think are the 3 highest priority initiatives or actions that can be done to reduce impacts of climate change and improve the quality of life? 53% of you said increased use of renewable energy. Also 53% said increased city and community green infrastructure initiatives like tree planting, vegetating swales, and increased restoration of coastal habitats. And 34% of you said increased community awareness and education. And another 34% said updating codes, planning, and infrastructure based on best available science. All right, so with this, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the poll and we can move forward with our programming. Right.
Thank you. Thanks, Madi. Okay, well, great. We have we're going to go into our presentation now on climate and health equity. And Olivia, I think, is going to kick us off. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for inviting Clio once again. Let me just get my presentation up. So today I'm just going to contextualize the conversation and give a really brief primer on what the climate crisis is, what are some of the main causes and some of the impacts. And I'll let Myra deep dive a little bit more into what the health impacts are on climate change. So my name is Olivia and I'm the Director of Programs for the Clio Institute. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Florida. And our goal is to educate residents about the climate crisis so that our residents are equipped to take climate action. So when we talk about climate change, we know there's a lot of misinformation in the media and online. But there is a scientific consensus around the climate crisis. Most scientists agree that climate change is real, it's happening now, and it's in large part due to human activity. And when we talk about human activity, we're referring to industrial activities that have raised carbon dioxide levels and other greenhouse gas levels in our atmosphere. So when I'm talking about industrial activity, I'm referring to things like transportation, manufacturing, electricity production, and the like. So in the United States and globally, we are still heavily dependent for our energy on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are oil, coal, and gas. And when we burn fossil fuels, we emit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases are also heat trapping gases. They trap Earth's outgoing heat and they warm the planet. As you can see on the right-hand side, more than 80% of our energy in the United States comes from fossil fuels. Therefore, as our population grows and we continue to consume, we are producing an immense amount of excess greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. So to understand climate change, you really need to talk about the greenhouse gas effect. And I'm going to explain this in really simple terms. So most of our incoming energy comes from the sun in the form of light, and it comes down toward planet Earth through the atmosphere. The atmosphere in this image is represented by the blue line that you see there. So the light hits the planet, some of it is reflected right back into space, but the bulk of it is absorbed by planet Earth for biological processes. And then that energy is released by the planet, mostly in the form of heat. That heat rises and some of it escapes into space, but a lot of it is trapped in the atmosphere by those heat trapping gases or also greenhouse gases. In a balanced system, our planet is not warming too much, right? It's thanks to the greenhouse gas effect that we have the amazing ecosystems that we have on planet Earth now. However, as I mentioned just before, because we're dependent on oil, coal, and gas, and we burn so much of it, and when we burn it, we emit all of these excess greenhouse gases, too much of that heat is being trapped in Earth's atmosphere, and that's basically creating like a blanketing effect around the planet, and that's what's leading to global warming. This is a great little visualization from NASA that shows you how much the planet has warmed since the late 1880s. The last 5 years have been the hottest on record, and we continue to see hotter temperatures every single year. The GIF is a little bit slow today. So that takes us to 2019. And some the planet is getting warmer. What does that really mean? What is happening in the background? So one of the first things we need to look at is what's happening to Earth's ice as we're experiencing warmer temperatures across the globe. So there's two kinds of ice. There's land ice, which is ice sheets and glaciers, and we have sea ice, which is frozen seawater. And basically, both types of ice are melting at an unprecedented rate. And on the right-hand side, you can see the Arctic sea ice decline from the 1980s all the way to today. So the melting of land ice is one of the largest drivers of sea level rise. Sea level rise is one of the most common impacts of climate change that we hear a lot about, especially here in Miami. We are ground zero for sea level rise. In about 30 years, we can expect to see at least 2 feet, but by the end of the century, we can't rule out 8 to 10 feet of sea level rise. And on the right-hand side of my screen, you can see a map of Miami-Dade County today and what Miami-Dade County would look like with 8 feet of sea level rise. So we're kind of experiencing a new normal when it comes to climate change. And the picture that you see here was taken in, I think, Liberty City many years ago during what we call sunny day flooding. So not only are we experiencing sea level rise, but it's also making natural phenomenons worse. So king tides or sunny day flooding are natural occurring phenomenon. They usually happen for a few days in September, October, and November. They're very predictable. And every year we know exactly when they're going to happen. However, because the seas are rising, we're seeing areas that didn't flood before are now starting to flood. And we can expect to see more frequent sunny day flooding moving forward. We can't talk about climate change and a warming world without talking about extreme weather events. One of the biggest impacts climate change is having is on our weather. As I mentioned earlier, we are experiencing global warming, temperatures are going up, but it's not just the air that's getting warmer. Our oceans are also absorbing an enormous amount of that excess heat. And warm water acts as fuel for stronger hurricanes. So basically what we can expect to see moving forward with changes as a result of climate change are stronger, larger hurricanes. Warmer air can hold more moisture, which means we also are starting to see heavier rainfall events, even outside of hurricanes. And these combined will create stronger storm surge when hurricanes make landfall. On the right-hand side is an image of the trajectory of Hurricane Michael in 2018. And as it moved through the Gulf, the waters were 5 degrees warmer than average. Hurricane Michael made landfall as a hurricane category 5. So the warm water allowed the hurricane to intensify very quickly before it made landfall in northern Florida. Another impact of climate change is saltwater intrusion. So I already just talked about how we're seeing sea level rise, but it's not just rising from the coast, it's also rising from beneath us. And that's because we have a very particular geology here in Florida, and we sit on porous limestone. So the water is rising under our feet as well, and it's intruding on our fresh drinking water supplies. In South Florida, I think about 90% of residents get their drinking water supply from the Biscayne Bay aquifer, which is at risk of saltwater intrusion. And in some communities like Hallandale, for example, they've already had to move some of their drinking water wells inland because of saltwater intrusion. And this is not just a health issue, but it's also an equity issue, because while we can figure out ways to clean that water and filter out the salt, water will only become more expensive, and this will disproportionately impact some of our marginalized communities. And of course, we can't talk about global warming or climate change without talking about extreme heat. And this is something I think we're going to be touching on later on. But this is one of the most obvious consequences of climate change. But in Florida, I think some of us are still getting used to the idea, because we live in a tropical area. We don't think it's really getting hotter, but it is getting significantly hotter. And there are a lot of really cool interactive tools and maps that you can find out there online. But this graphic really just summarizes very quickly what we can expect to see in the next 10 years. So by 2030, more than a third of the year will be over 105 degrees. So when we talk about the heat index, we're talking about humidity and temperature together. This has equity implications, this has health implications, this has economic implications. So extreme heat is a really severe threat from the climate crisis. And again, everything I just mentioned has some sort of impact on our health. And there's a lot of things I didn't have an opportunity to cover because I only have a few minutes to talk about the topic. But overall, climate change impacts our health in so many different ways, from increased vector-borne diseases to impacts on our mental health. But the message here really is that everything is connected to the climate crisis, and especially our quality of life. Thank you.
Where's Myra? Oh, there she is. Myra, take it away.
Thank you. I'm just getting set up here.
Thank you, Olivia.
So I get set up here. My name is Myra and I work at Catalyst Miami. I'm the Climate Resilience Program Manager there. And I'm just gonna start presenting now. I know we're running a little behind, so I'll make sure to speed through this a little bit. Okay. So Olivia started touching on this, but extreme heat, is why we're here today to discuss this issue. So really when we're talking about extreme heat, we're talking about temperatures that get to be to a point where they feel oppressive. And so this is just like a quick little snapshot of how the National Weather Service defines extreme heat. So you can see that this combines humidity and temperature and just shows that at certain thresholds, it can become dangerous and, even in life-threatening to be exposed to extreme heat temperatures for a long period of time. So here we're thinking about 2 to 3 days, maybe of temperatures above 90 degrees. So this comes from the same report that Olivia was talking about before, but also just showing that extreme heat here has changed quite a lot historically. Just looking back from 1970 to 2015, we now have 72.5 more days since then that we've experienced temperatures above 90 degrees. And I think, yes. And just looking to the future too, this is kind of another way of looking at that graph that Olivia showed, but by 2050, we expect to have 6 times as many days of extreme heat. So here we're talking about above 105 degrees per year than the current average, which really, that's basically almost half the year that we're talking about there, which is really concerning to think about the future and what that might look like for all of us here. A big component of this and the equation is our urban tree canopy and the urban heat island effect, which this should hopefully be a familiar picture. This is just like a snapshot of Miami and what it looks like. But if you take a look at it, there are some trees, but it's not a huge amount. There's a lot of streets, there's a lot of pavement. It doesn't seem to have any like public transit readily available. So when we're talking about the urban heat island effect, we're really talking about the fact that we have darker surfaces, we have pavement, we have less green areas that can really help to combat extreme heat, because things like water and lighter surfaces, they can either absorb the heat or bounce back the heat. So those things help us stay cool. And in the way that Miami is set up, we just don't have that kind of infrastructure in place, which is a big problem. And it's especially a big problem if we're taking a look at our lower income communities here in Miami that also tend to be people of color. So the top picture may be familiar to some of you, but that's just a snapshot of a bus stop in Liberty City. And the picture below will probably be very familiar to many of you, but that's just a snapshot of Coral Way. But you can see that, you know, there's a pretty stark difference here. You have a bike lane on Coral Way. You have these gorgeous, beautiful trees that provide a lot of shade that, you know, also provide a lot of mental health benefits to those that are outside and able to enjoy this. Whereas if you have someone that's low on resources, lower income, has to wait for the bus to get to work or buy groceries, that's not a lot of shade for them to wait for the bus. You know, people are getting exposed to extreme temperatures. We all know that this summer was even hotter than usual. And so these are just some of the inequities that you start to see when you start to look at extreme heat impacts. And unfortunately, it really is our lower income communities of color that are bearing the brunt of this and experiencing these impacts. So this is just another snapshot showing the urban heat island effect. So you can see that more rural areas tend to be cooler, whereas you get to go more into the urban core, it gets to be a lot warmer. And vulnerable populations, so there's many. And I should update this to also include pregnant women. That's something that we've been talking about more locally, but even pregnant women, if they're exposed to extreme heat temperatures at a certain threshold, they might have preterm births or low birth weights for their babies. So that's something that I've been talking about more locally. But especially here, we're talking about Miami and our who makes up our workforce. We're thinking of outdoor workers, people who work in agriculture. So that's a really big concern to us, the fact that we have people, you know, being exposed to all of this. And so we also have an elderly population, people that are working in the service industry, like outside construction. So those are all major concerns for us here. These are some of the risk factors. I won't go too much into this, but there are many things that can predispose you to be impacted by extreme heat, which can lead to severe health impacts like having a heat stroke or, you know, fainting, nausea, all sorts of things. And we'll probably talk more about solutions later, but these are just some of the quick things. Some of the things that you all highlighted, like renewable energy, mass transit, greater access to parks and green spaces, all those things can definitely help us to get to a cooler future that's also filled with clean energy. So I will leave it there for now.
Thank you, Myra. And now I'd like to introduce Pia Palomino. I'm also very proud to communicate that she's a former Sea Level Solutions Center intern when she was at Florida International University. And I was so happy to run into her again in her new position with the Family Action Network movement. So Pia, please take it away.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm really happy that you asked me to join. So my name is Pia Palomino, and I'm with Family Action Network Movement, a nonprofit organization based in Little Haiti. So at Family Action Network Movement, we provide services to low-income families, and we organize and educate our members around social issues in order to strengthen their role in the community. So our organization works directly with the community in Little Haiti, and so we see the community being affected by the issues of climate change. Some issues are easier to see than others, and extreme heat is one of the issues that we are most familiar with here in Florida. Most people are used to complaining about the heat when they step outside for a second, but for low-income families, the heat is really inescapable. So when you think about who's going to be most affected by climate issues, like Myra mentioned before me, the first to be affected are those in low-income communities, minorities, homeless, elderly. In Little Haiti, the median household income is between $20,000 to $30,000 a year, which means that some people cannot afford to even have their own car, and many have no choice but to use public transportation, which we all know is not the best here in Miami. So some of the buses that people are using to get back and forth don't even have air conditioning available. And if they don't have air conditioning in their homes or on public transportation, then they're basically stuck in the heat all day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the heat affects the body. So living in Miami, I'm sure we've all gotten a sunburn at least once or twice, but prolonged exposure to heat can cause heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat cramps is caused by the loss of body salts and fluids during sweating, and it could be painful. And then heat exhaustion is how the body responds to loss of water and fluids from heavy sweating. And the symptoms get worse, which include headaches, nausea, dizziness, weakness, thirst. But the most serious of these is heat stroke, which is what happens when the body gets so hot that it can't regulate its core temperature. So when people go into heat stroke, they stop sweating, so their bodies can't get rid of the excess heat, which causes confusion, loss of consciousness, and seizures. Heat stroke is a very serious medical emergency that can result in death. So under this changing climate, the likelihood of dangerous heat-related health risks increasing is very real. In addition to this, heat waves exacerbate issues within the cardiovascular system and cause health complications. And another major concern that we probably have dealt with at one point is dehydration, but it's particularly dangerous in children because they lose sweat much faster and are more susceptible to overheating. So when you think about those who work outside all day, such as those in construction and agricultural industries, they will need access to water and cool down stations to reduce their body temperatures. So society's most vulnerable population, children, the elderly, and the poor, will be mostly adversely affected by heat waves. So one way that we can talk about combating this issue is to increase the urban canopy of the community through parks, green spaces, or the planting of trees alongside the street. This is a proven way to have significant impact on bringing the temperature down. Parks and open spaces can be designed to mitigate the effects of flooding, can help reduce the urban heat island effect, or contribute to air quality, and they also sequester carbon from the atmosphere. So green infrastructure practices can produce positive health outcomes, and that translates to reduced costs to local healthcare systems. So in Miami, unfortunately, we see most of the new parks being constructed in wealthier neighborhoods and in suburbs, while increasing green spaces in low-income communities like Little Haiti, where the community is most vulnerable, they're often overlooked. So even though we have a higher number of people walking in the street or using public transportation, most of the streets here in Little Haiti have little to no trees or shade. And instead, we see the streets covered with construction buildings, businesses, and warehouses. There's a lot of concrete, glass, and asphalt that are used, that are common in construction. And these, they trap heat during the day and then they release it at night. So it escapes much slower than it was trapped. And when the sun goes down, we're still feeling the heat. So what other states in the US have taken measures to combat extreme heat is that they have provided their low-income families with cooling shelters. So in Rhode Island, there are some cooling shelters that are open 24/7, which are targeted for homeless residents that don't want to suffer from being outside all day long in the heat. And in Toronto, even among the coronavirus pandemic, they have opened at least 6 emergency cooling shelters for the low-income community where they enforce social distancing and provide sanitation and water to those who come in. And this is really an example of adapting to climate issues by making sure that the most vulnerable are taken care of. And this is what we should be doing here in Miami. These are the examples that we should be following, and public funding should be used to build community resilience. So another low-cost beneficial idea for tackling heat in the community is simple. It could be a public pool. Here in Little Haiti, we only have one public community pool, but if you ask most of the residents and people that even come into FAM, no one knows where it's located or even how to make use of it. So increasing these kinds of spaces where residents can cool off can greatly benefit families, especially during the weekend where they can bring their children and relax. Most houses that you see in Little Haiti here have no pools compared to all the luxury pools we see in the homes around the city of Miami. So public pools are another low-cost option that not only serves to bring the community together, but also provides shelter to the extreme heat. Like I mentioned before, here in Little Haiti, you see groups of people walking outside, waiting for the bus, using public transportation, because many of them don't have the means to be driving around in their own cars and taking advantage of like the safety of being protected from the heat. So instead, you see groups of people huddled together under a small area of shade, usually coming off the side of a building, which is even more dangerous and unacceptable now during the pandemic. These people are risking their lives really just to be provided with some shade and relief from the heat. And this is another reason why we need more solutions and green spaces here in Little Haiti. Resilience infrastructure is really the key to future urban development and plays an even bigger role as the climate stakes get higher. But it's important to remember to make it affordable in order for it to not disproportionately affect communities. So it's important just to think about these things and think about how communities will have the resources to protect themselves against the heat. Much of the homeless population here and in many places in the country struggle with not being able to access public spaces such as shopping malls and libraries, which they often use to cool off from the heat. Here in Miami, going to these public spaces, to the stores, is their only option because we don't have any cooling shelters, even though we experience some of the worst heat in the US. And even at FAM, we have lots of rallies and events outside, and it's always our priority to make sure our members are safe and taken care of. We always provide them with tents to cover them from the sun, water, ice, sanitation, and food. So we have to prioritize the health of the community we are serving, not endangering them. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pia, very much. Okay, so Madi, please take it away.
Sounds good. Great presentation, Pia and Olivia and Myra. Thank you so much. So based on their presentation, we're going to do a how do we do poll. Again, we're not quizzing you. We really just want to know what you're thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. And this is just 4 questions. The first question you should be seeing on your screen is a true or false. Is climate change affects everyone? Wait, hold on. Climate change affects everyone's health, but some people are more vulnerable than others. Is it true or is it false? This is a single response. The second question you should be seeing on your screen is which of the following populations are more vulnerable to climate health impacts? You have people with existing heart and lung conditions, people who lack financial and social resources, the elderly, pregnant women, infants, and children, or all of the above, or none of the above. This is also a single choice question. The third question you should be seeing on the screen is which of the following is not an impact of climate change on our health? You can select multiple answers for this one. The options are high heat days pose the risk of heat illness, vector-borne diseases are spreading, extreme weather such as hurricane pose the risk of traumatic injuries, increased exposure to cigarettes smoked increases the risk of lung cancer, and allergies are increasing from pollen. And I think that response might have had an addition to that. And the last question you should be seeing on your screen is also true or false. Is carbon dioxide a greenhouse gas? True or false? And this also a single response. So for true, select yes. For false, select no. And we have 61% of you have voted, so hopefully we get up to 86%. And I'll share these results with you all. So I'm going to give you about 1 more minute to answer these, and we'll go over these. All right, we're about 75% now. Can we get to a higher number?
I believe we can.
77. $78. I think we can get a little higher than that. All right, I'm 15 more seconds. I believe we're translating, or we will be translating this. So maybe I can give you 15 more seconds. We're at 78%. All right, well, I'm gonna go 80, awesome, that satisfies. So I'm gonna go ahead and share the results with you all now. Thanks for those who voted. And let's take a look at what we think. So true or false, climate change affects everyone's health, but some people are more vulnerable than others. That is correct. A lot more people are vulnerable than others. Which of the following populations are more vulnerable to climate change, climate health impacts? All of the above. So people with existing heart and lung conditions, people who lack financial and social resources, the elderly, pregnant women, and infants and children, are those populations more vulnerable to climate health impacts. So which of the following is not an impact of climate change on our health? Well, increased exposure to cigarette smoke increases the risk of lung cancer, but that is correct. That is not an impact of climate change. The ones that are high heat days pose the risk of heat illnesses, vector-borne diseases are spreading, and extreme heat such as hurricane poses a risk of traumatic injuries, and allergies are increasing from pollen. And the last question was, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas? Correct, yes, greenhouse gases are a variety of different ones, but carbon dioxide is the primarily one. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and continue with our program. Thanks again.
Thank you, Madi. What do we have next? Dr. Susan Jacobson, great. So now we're going to proceed with citizen science, discussing the smartphone application and some of the temperature data that are collected with our citizen science heat monitoring efforts. Dr. Susan?
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Susan Jacobson. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Journalism and Media at FIU. And for the past couple of years, I have been working with the Sea Level Solutions Center at FIU and with Catalyst Miami on a project, a citizen science project that you all are invited to participate in, where we ask citizens to place little heat monitors around South Florida to see how hot or it can get in different areas. I'm going to show you a little bit about that, and I'm going to show you how you can participate. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so let me make this fuller. This is the MISON website. MISON stands for the Miami Environmental Science Action Network. And on this website, we will have a link to this webinar later on, but we have resources related to sea level rise, composting, water quality, and our project, Miami Shade, where we go out and we ask citizens to document, help us document heat around Miami. As the excellent presentations earlier explained, heat has a very immediate impact, especially on those of us in South Florida, because we have hotter weather here. And so part of this effort is to find out how hot it really is out there. So just to give you an example of some of the things that we have seen during our, from our project, is this is a map of where we placed our little, we call them I buttons. They're little round metal buttons, where we placed them around South Florida in the summer of 2019. And each dot represents a different location. And here, I'm going to make this map bigger. And what you're seeing here are the average high temperatures of each of these locations during the months of June to September 2019. And the darker the pin, the higher the number. So this is we're taking all the high temperatures, daily high temperatures, and we're averaging them. So you can see some of the hottest areas here that got up to 103.29 average high. And among the things that we ask participants to do is to show us where they place the I buttons, the little devices that are measuring the heat. And as you can see here, it's a bus stop in somewhere in Midtown Miami. Oh, sorry. Okay, I've lost my map. Okay. Another very hot area over here. Again, another contextual photo, again on another bus stop. Bus stops are important because this is where people hang out during the course of their normal lives. We also ask people to give a contextual photo so that we can see where exactly on the a close-up photo, where exactly on the place where the location they have chosen to put their I button, they have put it. This helps us so we can retrieve it. So the I button collects data for 3 months. So we ask you to put in the field to use this application to document where it's going to be, and then to return it to us. And then we download the data and analyze it. And now I'm going to show you a little video that should that kind of goes through the process of how we ask you to sign up, and the kind of and how you use the little application. All right, so here we go. So this is the sign up form. We ask you to sign up first and tell us where you want to put your I button. So bus stops are good places to put your I button. Maybe on a bench in a park. Maybe on something else that you see that's out in public. So some of the places where we have put these I buttons. Bet you didn't know that was there. That was creative placement.
That's Myra.
I think it is. Okay, you're going to use a little smartphone app to document the location of the I button. So the app is a web app, and you can go to it from that URL. So these are step-by-step instructions.
That was a little fast, Susan. Can we go back to the QR code?
You want to go back to the QR code for a minute? Okay, hang on. Let's see if I can stop this crazy thing. All right, that was a little fast, wasn't it? I can make that stay longer. All right, so yeah, so this is the QR code and the URL for the app where you will enter your data.
So how do you use a QR code, Susan?
So to use the QR code, you take your smartphone and you just need to hold the camera up to the QR code and will automatically take you to the website. So it's a web-based app. It's not a native app. You don't have to download it. So it's very easy to use. All right. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
So we will have instructions in English, Spanish, and Creole. We have the form actually in English, Spanish, and Creole. So we have a map, and usually the map appears on the form, and the red pin will indicate your location. If it doesn't, you can just enter it. And if you don't see the map, please enter the address and the location in the area below. Okay, and then take a contextual photo of your iButton location. Again, the contextual photo shows us, you know, the surrounding environment where you've placed the iButton. And it will take a second to upload your photo. Then take a close-up photo, and good close-up photos will show us the number that's written on the iButton. Okay, then describe the placement of your location. Is it on a bench? Is it sunny or shaded? You want to remember not to put it in direct sunlight. And then hit submit. So a couple tips: don't place the iButton in direct sunlight. Okay, once we receive your form, someone will get back to you. If you don't hear from us, please contact us. And thank you. All right, so that's the basic overview of how to participate in this project. I'm going to hand it over to Mari, who's going to give you some additional information about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan. So allow me to just kind of recap and give you guys like next steps. So essentially the website that Dr. Jacobson was showing to us is the MISON website where you're going to be able to learn a little bit more about this project. The most important thing, if you are interested in participating in going out and deploying this quarter-size sensors in your neighborhood, all you have to do is sign up, and then we will contact you, or you can contact us as well. But essentially it's going out there and placing them and letting us know where you're placing them. That way we collect the data. And especially now that we're doing COVID, we're kind of doing it a little bit different. So we definitely need your support on this. And then here are all the important information that you may need to know. And we'll also teach you how to deploy them. And we'll also give them the sensors to you and show you how you can fill out the actual deployment form. So again, the first form is letting us know that you're interested. And then the second part would be us giving you the sensors, and then you'll use the application once you're out there on the field.
Thanks, Mari, very much. And of course, the folks at the Family Action Network Movement already have their sensors, and they are doing a deployment, I think, after the webinar today. So we're really excited about that participation, and look forward to seeing where you all are going to be deploying your sensors. So we're a little bit behind time, but we would like to get a little bit of panel Q&A in, if that would be okay with our panelists.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. It's just a lot of really great information we wanted to share with everyone today. So Alyssa, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So yes, I would like to call all our panelists to the virtual floor. We're going to start off with a question that came in the Q&A feature here on Zoom. It's directed to Pia. There's Maria. She's asking, what can someone who lives in Miami do to improve their quality of life?
So there's a lot of things that we can do to not only improve our quality of life, but to also live more sustainably, which I think that's something that we all are trying to do in this webinar. Uh, one of them could be, simply just reducing the time you spend in your car, exercising, riding your bike, simple things like that, taking a walk to the grocery store or to the pharmacy if you need to pick something up. I found that since I moved to Little Haiti, I've been able to walk around more because things are a little bit closer, and that really just gives me a peace of mind. Another thing that we can do is reduce our waste, live more sustainably, minimize, have not try not to hoard so much, which it could be hard. I think, minimizing coming home, saying that you don't have an excess of, things and really just what you need helps us, feel more calm inside. And also we can donate or give to someone else. Another one that I've taken on is, like reducing meat consumption, which is really popular nowadays. Maybe not cut it out completely if you're not comfortable with that, but start by, one day a week that you
Yeah,
decide.
integrating those little changes kind of thing. Yeah. And I think also just living sustainably, although it's good for the planet, it also has this adverse effects that can help people. So all those little initiatives. Awesome. Thank you. Now I'm going to pass the question over to Olivia. So Olivia, how would you say is a way to best integrate this kind of dialogue into like curriculums for either med school or different universities and at the educational level? I'm sorry, at the school system level.
Yeah, so I'm not a curriculum specialist, but Clio does have a program that we go into high schools in particular. At universities, I think there are a lot more options for students to take classes that are focused on particular topics. But in high school, students generally, they might have a few options, but typically the curriculum is set. And I think one way is to, like, for example, next week we have a teacher training where we're helping teachers K through 12 understand how to integrate climate change in a creative way in their curriculum. So there are a lot of resources out there for teachers, such as the Clean Network resources, which I think are from NASA, but teachers really have to be creative, and organizations like Clio and Catalyst and FAM have to help those teachers understand what they can bring into their classroom. So it's all about collaborations in a lot of ways and helping teachers understand easy ways, because they already have a lot on their plate and they're dealing with a lot, especially as a result of COVID. So I think in the high school level, it's, we come and we bring climate change presentations to the students as well, not just to the teachers. So any way that we can collaborate with schools, we do, because we know that the kids who are in K through 12 are the ones that are going to be impacted by climate change the most.
Sure, yeah, I see what you're saying. And I also imagine, of course, that what can be implemented at a school curriculum level can somehow be integrated at a neighborhood level. So those same kind of resources can go out to different neighborhood organizations and like it does for school curriculum be implemented.
Absolutely.
Cool. And then my last question I'm going to send towards Myra. So what are some current plans to address inequity related to South Florida? What have you been seeing there out going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening, thankfully, which is a good thing to say. Specifically around extreme heat, I'll just focus on that since that's what we're talking about today. We have a lot more interest now on discussing extreme heat issues, thankfully. I think we've been a little behind as like a city and county. Pia talked about other cities like in Europe and even here that have plans in place and have been working on this through the pandemic, and we're not there yet. But thankfully we have groups like ours here that are represented. We have researchers now from FIU and that are working on this to get us the data that we need, because we don't know all the specifics yet about how people are impacted, how their well-being is impacted here locally, which is important. We do need the data too. And then we also have initiatives that are being carried out by different organizations like the Women's Fund and Human Rights Watch group, who are focusing on increasing heat messaging, especially for populations that are left out from messaging, like low income folks and also pregnant women, which I mentioned earlier is something newer. And CATA's Miami is undertaking more climate and health work too, through the Climate Health Equity Coalition, which Clio, FIU, and others are part of. And we're hoping to implement more solutions around that intersection of climate and health. And a lot of them, which have been told to us by community members, are around extreme heat. So really providing ways that we can minimize those impacts on communities. So there's a lot of exciting work coming your way, and we'll definitely keep you all posted on that, because we definitely need your help and want you all to inform the work that we're doing. But thankfully, I think we're on the right track.
That's great to hear. I'm so glad. Well, I wish I had time for more questions, but thank you, panelists. I will pass it over to Mari for our last poll to wrap up our webinar. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and panelists. And let's go ahead and do our last satisfaction poll. Let us know what you think. The first question you should be seeing on your screen is, how would you rate today's webinar? Would you give us a high 5? Do you think it was terrible or a waste of your time? The second question is, would you like to participate in our upcoming citizen science monitoring event? Again, we really need your support in this, so please reach out. And number 3, do you plan to implement on the activities you learned about today and reporting it using a smartphone or other device, which is essentially our application that Dr. Jacobson was showing us. So I see some questions coming in. But with that being said, thank you again for joining today's wonderful discussion, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, panelists, very much for your presentations today. And Susan and Mari and Alyssa for pulling off an incredible webinar series for our environmental education program with Miami-Dade County, and all of the wonderful partners we've had participate in this webinar series over the last, I don't know, what has it been? It seems like 10 months, is that 10 months? Yeah. So thanks everyone. We look forward to all of the future collaborations that we will have together, and take care.
Thank you.
And have fun deploying.
Thank you. Really looking forward to that.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.